There's a beacon set in Chicago by our bad guys, because they always set beacons. And the beacon is drawing these rampaging monsters to Chicago. Oh, no. I can promise you that they're not going to Chicago to sit and chill and watch Netflix. They're going to Chicago to wreck shit.
It is super fun, and the audience are transported into downtown Chicago and watching Dwayne Johnson take on these three creatures. Chicago was linked to the game. The lab was in Illinois. But the other thing that was more practical to the story was just where it sat inside of the U.S. in terms of the creatures and where they would converge to.
Their trajectories have them both going in a straight line to the city.
Two different species making a coordinated long-distance journey that just doesn't happen.
I'd never been to Chicago before, so the first time I went there, I just kind of took in the city like a tourist, and I based what I did in the movie on that.
It's such a strong architectural city. So you want to hit those iconic moments. People that are from the city recognize, people that visit the city want to go and see.
We had some initial conversations about how the production was actually going to shoot the action sequence at the end. Obviously, we're not going to destroy Chicago, and there were going to be three aspects that we had to pull together. One, shooting plates of these famous buildings. Then we're also going to shoot a lot of the action with Dwayne that had to be really rooted in the environment. They were building sets on the back lot that he could interact with. But then we have to do all the digital destruction in that environment, and the creatures have to be smashing through it and tying that all together.
Rampage, by its very nature, has required us to take on the most destruction that we've ever probably had to do in a single film before.
We've got the three monsters, we have Dwayne Johnson, and of course we have our big buildings that we're destroying, which is kind of our fifth star of the movie.
In order to bring this to screen, it basically required us to reconstruct the entirety of what we see in Chicago. First in an undestroyed state, because we actually have to show that destruction happening. So, of course, we had to collect reference. We had teams on the ground in Chicago collecting thousands and thousands and thousands of photographs.
Weta, they had our LiDAR, which gave them the real photographic elements of Chicago pre-destroyed.
It was critical to Brad to make sure that Chicago felt like you were there.
And in order to achieve that, we had to actually film there.
We knew that was going to be one of the hardest sequences in the movie to pull off. And we actually went to Chicago and shut down entire Michigan Avenue.
And we had to shut down the river going through Chicago. We had to shut down the bridges going over that river.
There is a huge military aspect to this. We had a massive unit there and boots on the ground there.
It was really important to get everything out of Chicago that we could. We brought on Fred North because he's the best in the business at the helicopter aerials.
You have a pilot who is not just willing, but very, very capable, and will do insane stuff. So I scouted Chicago, and I was like, Fred, I want to start a helicopter between these two buildings. I want you to shoot forward, swing behind it.
Pretty much right at each other, doing about 40 miles an hour, almost T-bone in an intersection.
And then get a shot of that helicopter with the creatures down here, and then the bridge where the military is shooting.
There was a lot of news footage coming out of Chicago on the days we were shooting because the helicopter was flying 30 feet above streets and flying through their buildings, and his footage is unparalleled.
We got all the footage we needed out of Chicago, and then we built these big sets so that we could actually have Dwayne touch, run on, and interact with.
We built Federal Plaza on the back lot of our stages, Third Rail in Atlanta.
The challenge was creating this vast area and not building it all.
To build practical sets everywhere we possibly could build them, and add a little bit of green screen just helped me as a performer. It was invaluable.
These sets are ridiculous. They're astounding. They're truly astounding. We're shooting on top of a built rooftop of a skyscraper.
The Willis Tower rooftop, it's a big part of the third act. They shoot it clean, and after the fact we build it, they started talking about they wanted the building to shake.
So when George is jumping up on the rooftop, ripping stuff apart, we're throwing real pieces of debris at the actors. The floor is shaking, all the scaffolding stuff is wiggling around. So we're giving the combination of big digital extensions, but the pieces they're on are alive.
That's the one, guys.
The creatures climb up it, do quite a bit of damage, and in the process, it becomes structurally unsound and comes down.
Willis Tower is the second largest building in the United States, in the top 20 of the largest buildings in the world. It's 110 stories, over 1,400 feet tall, and for simulations and effects, that's a lot of geometry. That's a lot of things in computer graphics to have to simulate and calculate.
Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God!
Literally riding them in helicopters like you're riding an avalanche.
Oh my God!
So that one single event unfolds over the course of a dozen shots or so. So there's quite a bit of work there just in terms of destroying it in a believable way for something that size.
Typically, a lot of the times if we do digital city work, you're building the facade. You see the windows, you see the outside walls, maybe you see some lights inside, but you don't really have to think about how the building was built. This is a little bit different. Knowing that this tower has to fall down in order to build these assets in the first place, we have to do a lot of historic research. What were the construction methods used? What does the steel structure look like underneath this building? So once the tower has come down, we are left with this war zone, just mounds and mounds of destroyed building material, rubble, steel beams, giant concrete slabs, office furniture, every manner and form of thing you can imagine.
We built little islands of debris, and we put Dwayne on these different islands depending on where he was. They were completely disconnected from one another, so if you went and saw the set, it would just look like piles of random dirt, but there'd be a helicopter on one and a part of a building on another.
What we did is we analyzed when the Willis Tower comes down. We looked at what buildings would it hit and tried to duplicate them as best we could so that when you see the rubble, you literally feel that building.
There's tons of rocks all over the place. There's stone, there's jutted edges, there's wires. It's a legitimate destruction site that we've created.
Because there is destruction and debris, twisted metal, concrete. It is everywhere. There's smoke machines. You're coughing legitimately. I mean, you're in it. Fog's coming in. It might be too much. It's a different movie.
And you would shoot little pieces, then run to the next pile and shoot another piece and run to the next pile and shoot the stunt.
And we then give it to Weta, and then Weta just goes to town and does their magic.
Action!
This is where we get to have some fun. This is where we get to have the monsters rolling all over these piles of debris.
Oh, shit!
The creatures interact with the buildings, either using them to their advantage or throwing each other into them.
So a lot of iconic buildings, like the building that Lizzie jumps through and has her big moment in the final showdown sequence.
Every interaction that the creatures have with each other also has an impact on the environment. Every piece of busted concrete that has to move has to kick up dust, and that dust has to interact with the creature. There's a lot of very complicated interaction that has to happen in an environment like this, and every department has to bring their A game to bring this to fruition.
We evacuated the city. So when you evacuate the city as best you can, when the monsters get there, well, shit's on.
You're seeing and witnessing things that are just so extraordinary, and you're having a blast the entire time.
It looked fun on the page, it looked fun in the previews, but when you're actually in Chicago with real helicopters flying around doing very dangerous stuff and getting these amazing shots, it's like that was the sequence. I'm like, okay, this is just gonna be badass.
So it was a very complex system to build Chicago, shoot the real one, then destroy Chicago. And it ended up awesome.
I have a really close relationship with the city of Chicago. In essence, I started my wrestling career in Chicago, been there hundreds of times. So to see Chicago like this on the big screen was really spectacular.